Good afternoon, everybody. This is Sean Marshall from Lean Energy. Welcome to our beautiful Friday afternoon, April 12th. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who are new to our webinar, we host these webinars every other month, and we have several speakers today. We will take questions as we go along, time permitting. And so what we ask you to do is to please type any questions that you have in the chat box on your dashboard to the right of your screen. And Allison Elliott, who works with us at Lean, will be receiving those and then passing them along to us, and we'll make sure that they get answered once again as time permits. Here is the lineup for today's webinar. We have our guest speaker with us today, Matt Willis. Matt is a relatively new hire with Monterey Bay Community Power. He's the manager of energy business development. I know they're super excited to have him on board, and he's going to be talking to us today about MBCP's brand new microgrid Smart Connect program. So we'll look forward to that. We also have Sean McNeil back with us, who's the Ledge Director for Cal CCA, providing an update on how things are going up at the Capitol in Sacramento. We also have with us Scott Blazing, who is with Braun Blazing, Smith and Wynn. Scott has been a long-time regulatory attorney in the state of California and beyond, working on CCA and public power matters. Scott's with us today, but I will tell you that he has not been feeling terribly well. So we'll do a game day decision, and he will either give the report or I will give it for him. With apologies if I'm the one that has to do it, because I won't be nearly as interesting, but I will try. So with that, I want to just show you, we don't have everybody's name here, but we have the list of organizations joining us. I'm going to do a special shout out and just acknowledge that we have with us today several utilities, including Xcel Energy, PG&E, and somebody from Berkshire Hathaway, who's the parent company to Pacific Core up in Oregon, and Nevada Energy. So let's see, I'll say welcome to you all and just be acknowledged that you're with us today, as well as many other vendors, nonprofits, supporting individuals and local governments who are involved in CCA, both in California, but now increasingly from other parts of the country. So welcome everyone to today's call. Here is our lineup of illustrious speakers. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. And to keep things going, because we have a lot to cover, I'm going to dive right into our California update and then provide an update on what's happening outside of our state. There's a lot here, and I'm not going to read it all. You guys can see it. What I did here is I'm going to just pick out a couple of things to highlight for each one of our operational CCAs, and I want to appreciate that they send this information in to us every other month. One sort of thing to acknowledge that I've really noticed is as we've made our way deeper into 2019, with no launches in this particular calendar year, what we're seeing is a real settling in of the newer operational programs with a shift in focus to launching of energy programs, which is just really cool. And in particular, we're seeing a real focus on electric vehicle infrastructure and incentives, peak day pricing, demand response programs, community energy grants being offered by the CCA, and then a sort of a newer one that we see a lot this month is support for local reach codes in the building and transportation electrification sector, and we'll talk about those coming up shortly. So I just thought that it was a cool shift that I noticed as opposed to previous years when we've been doing these and really focused on programs coming online. So let's kick it off with Redwood Coast up in Humboldt. These guys continue to get just great points for innovative programs. The two things I want to highlight with them are that they have, their board adopted last month a 100% renewable power by 2025 target, which substantially increases their previous targets, and that will be with both renewable and carbon-free power. They have just adopted a feed-in tariff program, which will start here in just a few weeks to incentivize community renewables under 1 megawatt in size. Kind of a cool feature here is that they're going to be matching that with up to 2 megawatts of capacity each year until the 6 megawatt program total is the goal is met. At that point, they will decide whether or not they want to expand or increase that cap for their feed-in tariff. They also had a really great response to their new citizen sourcing initiative, excuse me. They received 8 proposals, 5 of them will advance. You can see there that they cover everything from energy efficiency in grow farms, e-bike and scooter incentives, a refrigerant proposal, and then finally installation of PV solar on manufactured mobile homes. So all of that will be going back to the board, I believe, at their June meeting for adoption and funding to move those 5 initiatives forward. Silicon Valley Clean Energy is one of about 5 that we'll be hearing about that are supporting REACH codes. What these are municipal codes that exceed the state standards. The ones that we are most interested in are those that are dealing with both building and transportation electrification. And these are codes that would be go into effect as of January 1, 2020. So thus the moniker REACH codes. SBCE is partnering with Peninsula Clean Energy in San Mateo County to co-develop these codes for their member jurisdictions. They're taking it a step further by providing TA, technical assistance, and $10,000 grants to member jurisdictions that adopt these more stringent codes, which is pretty innovative. So hats off there. You can also see that Silicon Valley is getting ready to, they've just adopted their electric vehicle program, and they've got a whole bunch of other stuff going on with their program blueprint. So check out their website for more on that. East Bay Community Energy is also supporting REACH codes for their member jurisdictions. They are in phase 2 or year 2 of their peak day demand response program. 2 items of note there that they are now adding A10 customers, which is a fairly large swath of commercial customers, and they are customizing their alert days to be more responsive to Alameda County weather conditions. So those alert days may or may not match with PG&E's. They can be separate from PG&E's alert days, and they've got their own system set up to reach out to their customers. So that program is moving along well. And they are soon to announce their Community Innovation Grants program. Check out their website. It's not quite up yet, but here in another week or so, they're going to be offering up to $40,000 for local energy projects that have a demonstrated community benefit. So take a look for their website. They will have applications, and I don't know what the total budget is for that, but more information can be found shortly. Clean Power SF is in their final enrollment of 250,000 accounts. So they will end up with a total of 365,000 accounts for 3,000 gigawatt hours per year. Their opt-outs remain low, as most of the opt-outs do around the state, which is great news. They have an RFO that will be issued in a couple of weeks for long-term renewable energy, with a preference for Bay Area or Northern California-based power resources. So take a look on their website for that. And they are also getting ready to roll out their peak day pricing program with targeted demand reduction between the late afternoon and early evening between the hours of 4 and 8 p.m. So that's the quick update from San Francisco. Moving on, in Sonoma. Sonoma's gotten a couple of awards recently, so hats off to these guys. They got the Gold Medal Award in the North Bay for Best Company to Do Business With, which is pretty great. In the North Bay, and their program manager, Rachel Kuykendall, is a top 40 under 40 in the North Bay, so congratulations there. Sonoma Clean Power, you're going to hear this again. They are also involved with the REACH codes. Theirs is a little bit different in Sonoma County. Their REACH codes would require all new construction to use high efficiency electric technology in new build, reducing GHG emissions by more than 2/3. And so this is not happening just yet in Mendocino County, but Rachel and others are working with several cities in the county in Sonoma to get those REACH codes adopted. We've heard about their Advanced Energy Rebuild program before. This is a program where Sonoma Clean Power and actually Marin Clean Energy has done the same up in Napa. To be responsive to the wildfire rebuild, they've offered grants of somewhere around $20,000 to integrate clean energy technology, energy efficient technology in the rebuilds. About 1/3 of the homes that have received grants have chosen to go all electric with their rebuild, which is great. The other cool part about this is that Sonoma is working with PG&E and Edison to expand their own advanced energy rebuild programs in their fire affected areas, whether or not they're served by CCA. So that's a good bit of collaboration there, which is nice to see. San Jose Community Energy is in its 3rd month of service. And they are hosting an event there, as you can see, on April 25th. Their energy program roadmap is currently under development. And stay tuned for a power supply RFP that'll be out in the next couple of weeks. We've been waiting for that one. That's a multi-year RPS compliant power and should be a fairly large opportunity. So check that out and stay tuned. In Monterey, in our Tri-County CCA, they have just finished a partnership with Grid Alternatives to install 20 PV systems at no cost to 20 low-income families throughout their service territory, which is a great program. And it'll be interesting to know, Matt, when you speak to us, curious if that will be expanding to any additional homes going forward. Monterey Bay is also in the electric vehicle incentive realm, beginning in May with $1.125 million in EV infrastructure incentives for the Tri-County region. And we'll be hearing in just a minute about their Smart Savvy program. Moving on to Peninsula Clean Energy, which serves San Mateo County. They just got finished doing the final calculations on their 2018 rate savings. As many of you are aware, they have maintained a 5% discount from PG&E's rates on their generation rates. So the total that their customers saved in 2018 was $18.3 million spread across the county there, which is great. They are also, as we mentioned earlier, involved in REACH codes in partnership with Silicon Valley Clean Energy in the county of San Mateo. In the electric vehicle space, they have partnered with Peninsula Family Services and are offering $4,000 rebates to income qualified families who are interested in purchasing a used electric vehicle. And this is just another way to serve a low income population and make the shift in their transportation choices. They have an open RFP, as you can see. Last but not least, in Northern California is Valley Clean Energy, serving Yolo County and Davis and Woodland. Their news is pretty great. They went out a couple of months ago for 100 megawatts of in-state RPS qualified power. They ended up with 30 projects from 20 different developers representing well over 900 megawatts of power. And so sometimes we get the question, is there enough power to go along? Is there enough renewable power to go around if all of these new CCAs are coming online? And I think this is yet another demonstration that indeed, yes, there is plenty of market response. And I believe that all of these bids are for new renewable power resources. So I think that's a pretty exciting benchmark for VCE. And just like almost everybody else, these guys are also moving toward electric vehicle charging stations and infrastructure for their service territory. Okay, moving down to Southern California, it'll be a little briefer. Clean Power Alliance, as you all may be aware, in the last couple of months has been engaged in the largest mass residential customer enrollment in California's CCA history. They enrolled about 900,000 customers in the month of February, which was quite a feat, and they are now, full bore into notifications for their commercial enrollments that begin in a couple of weeks. So these guys have been absolutely swamped, and doing a great job keeping up with it all. They have an RFP open for a solar referral service, so you guys can take a look on their website for that. In Lancaster, Lancaster has three programs, or three things they're currently working on. I'm going to just call out one, which is their small commercial direct install. This is a program that was funded through California's public goods charge through their energy efficiency application to the CPUC. They've partnered with FES Energy Solutions and will have completed 300 energy efficiency upgrades for small commercial customers in the city of Lancaster this year. So, and that's a significant number of small commercial customers that are benefiting from that program. So that's what's happening there in Lancaster. The city of Palmdale recently announced that it is joining and taking service from CCEA, which is the group also associated with Lancaster. In San Diego, I think just about everybody knows now that the San Diego City Council adopted a resolution back in February to form a regional countywide CCA programs. Meetings have been ongoing with staff from the city of San Diego, North County City, Solana Beach, and now we have just learned that the city of Poway is interested in joining those discussions. They are continuing to target a 2021 launch. Moving down, we have some great news coming out of the Central Valley. Hats off to Center for Climate Protection that has really been supporting this effort now for at least a couple of years. In March, the city of Stockton voted unanimously to pursue a CCA program. I don't know if Woody Hastings is on the line, but I'm not sure exactly what the next steps are. Maybe we'll ask him to give an update at our next call. San Joaquin County, their board is planning an informational session in May, and the city of Fresno looks to be voting soon to allocate funding for a CCA study. So there's been quite a lot of activity in the Central Valley, forward motion here in the last 30 to 60 days. Finally, Orange County and its cities are investigating CCA, many workshops and information sessions. I've been on a couple of phone calls and all of that, so there's stuff happening in Orange County. And then the last thing that's not on this slide, but we got a late email from Desert Community Energy. They had to, as you may remember, they had to postpone their program last summer just due to market conditions and the PCIA proceeding and all of that. They are still on board. In fact, they have a board meeting coming up on Monday night with lots of stuff on it. They are still planning an early 2020 launch. They're dealing with some challenges right now with Southern California Edison, who will be updating their billing system apparently right about the same time. So there's some issues that they're trying to navigate around, but DCE is still online and looking to launch in 2020. Okay, so now we're going to step outside of California. Interest is growing. I know many of you have seen this slide here in the last couple of months. You can see the various categories there. There were 5 states that have introduced CCA legislation in the 2019 session. Unfortunately, all but one have not moved forward this year. The one that is moving forward is the state of New Hampshire. SB 286 was introduced back in the Senate in January. It has undergone a couple of rounds of amendments. It moved over to the House in March and has been referred to the House Municipal and County Government Committee, where it will have a hearing on April 23rd. What I like about this bill is that it has bipartisan support in the state. And so I actually think that this one is one of them that will make it for the 2019 session. So hats off to the state of New Hampshire. I do want to call out a bit of a description that I have there under each state. You can see the difference in CCA depending on the market structure there, which has a significant bearing on not only the way CCA works in that particular state, but also in the legislative language for those particular states. So it's quite different when you are in, trying to enact CCA in an already deregulated retail market versus, for example, Oregon, which is fully regulated and looking to emulate California to enter the wholesale market. So it's a different kettle of fish trying to get legislation passed in those types of states. Very briefly here, I'll just give you the quick rundown. Oregon's HB 2852 was essentially, it was not officially heard in committee, which was disappointing. The governor's cap and invest legislation did take priority, which we knew actually going into the session. There is an informational hearing set for late May. A couple of California CCAs participating in that, so thank you for that. Local government resolutions have been passed in Corvallis and Talent. Hood River County, we hope, will be up next. And local government and stakeholder outreach does continue in preparation for the 2020 legislative session. So we will be gearing up for that this coming fall. In Maryland, HB 730 was introduced in February. There was actually significant opposition from the Retail Energy Supply Association, some of those members, and PEPCO, which is a utility subsidiary of Constellation Exelon, which is unfortunate. But there were a couple of rounds of amendments. There are some things still to work out in the bill from a content perspective. It was referred to summer study, which is a nice way of saying it's not likely to advance this year. However, the primary sponsor on the House side is looking to rework the language and try again in 2020. In New Mexico, SB 374 did not advance, I think primarily because it did not have adequate in-state stakeholder support behind it. The New Energy Economy organization sponsored that, did a great job. They're very small, and so there's a real need for coalition building to make another run at that in 2020. In Connecticut, there were a number of bills that were floating around. HB 7114 was supposed to be a CCA bill. It ultimately was not. It's a solar schools bill. HB 6241 and 7015 are essentially spot bills. They have not moved. However, what we do see happening there is allied organizations getting organized, really understanding what they want out of their CCA for Connecticut, learning from New Jersey and New York, and mobilizing for 2020. In Arizona, we are not pursuing CCA from a legislative perspective there. It's more likely to come through a regulatory pathway. So there's a docket that's been opened there regarding electric competition. We are gearing up for some workshops that I believe are slated to begin in July. The Commission has asked for information on CCA. We have provided that information, and our goal is to make sure that CCA remains part of that discussion and that docket on electric choice as things move forward in Arizona. There's been some interesting developments in Colorado in the last couple of months. We've reported previously that members of Energy Freedom Colorado and other key stakeholder groups have investigated CCA along with several other community-based energy ideas for the state. I traveled there in early March as their guest and had an opportunity to meet with a couple of local governments, commissioners, state officials, and others. There is significant interest in Colorado in the California CCA model, which would likely be the one that would be best suited in a regulatory framework. They are still fully regulated in that state. A lot of questions and a lot of figuring out to do about how it might work. and real interest, I think, in trying to collaborate with Xcel Energy. I know you guys are on the phone, so I'm going to be positive in that regard. I know there are a lot of details to work out, but significant interest. There was a possibility that Senate Pro Tem Garcia was going to sponsor a late bill this session, but I don't believe that is going to happen. So 2020 is now the target. In the state of Virginia, Virginia Clean Energy is still looking for a technical energy consultant to do a rate analysis. If anybody is on the phone that does that kind of work, please reach out and I'll put you in touch. They did secure legal support and a legal intern from the University of Virginia who will be working with them. They're still targeting this fall for a study completion using Arlington County as a pilot. So that is my report, and I apologize that I went on a bit long there. There's just been a lot going on with a lot more to follow. So with that, thank you for your patience, and I'm now going to introduce our guest speaker. Matthew, take it away.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, so here at Monterey Bay Community Power, I'm going to just kind of walk us through a couple of our accolades, like what you had mentioned prior and recapped. Thank you for that. We can go on to the first slide and get going. So yeah, kind of our year-end roundup. These are kind of our highlights, so to speak. Probably the most significant ones are our rebate, as well as our programs that we've enlisted and started up this past year. I will get you, if we're going to run Project Sunshine again, I'm not sure if we're going into round 2 on that or not. But yes, we've had a good year, a successful year, and done a lot of good work. So we can move on to slide 2 here. We're looking at increasing our rebates this year due to reaching our financial goals last year. We were at 3% last year, and we're gonna be ramping up to 3.7 across the board. So last year we were over $4 million in savings to the customers, and it's the future is looking bright, so to speak. Next slide. So we're all pretty familiar with this distributed energy resources and microgrids, but just walking through what they are, just simply, just a smaller version of our larger grid, right? We're all in the know of that. We're all in this business. So multi-component system, wind, solar cogen, solar plus storage, EVs, as well as the software package that overlays and ties them all together. That's essentially what we're talking about here. So how do we go to market with those in our territory? We have a unique space here, similar to the Central Valley, where we're an extremely heavily agricultural community. Next slide. So that presents itself as us in the valley. We in the Salinas Valley, we have a grid constraint problem and an interconnection wait time that is stymieing a lot of economic development and growth within our communities. The problem of that interconnection wait time has been presented to us kind of throughout the community, and our solution is to provide that power in an expeditious fashion prior to the interconnection agreement, and be able to do that and supply a islanded system before interconnection. So we can potentially create the system as an island, and then on our side, MBCP, after we've financed and funded these systems, we're able to await the interconnection wait time and then monetize that on the back side. So realistically speaking, we're kind of not just using microgrids as a resilience resource, but more or less making it a grid constraint solution. Next slide. So our program workflow essentially is going to be establishing sites within our territory, our Tri-County region, through a site host application process. So that's identifying the metrics needed to construct projects with specific sites, and we'll initially accept one or more sites that are what we see as feasible for microgrid development. And then we'll take those sites to the EPC, the engineering, procurement, and construction market, and receive RFPs through the EPC market in a competitive fashion so that we can get good solutions of microgrids to our site hosts. We'll be financing those, and next slide, please. We'll be financing those and being able to put our money and balance sheet to work, so to speak. But it is going to take that site host to engage in a financial commitment to us, so as to make a partnership between not only a community member but ourselves. That development security deposit will be initially for the feasibility type of work on the project. Once we get through that, we will be, like I said, going through the RFP process to identify the selected EPC, and upon that agreement of EPC, the full security deposit will be put forth by the site host. So it's truly a go-to-market strategy for solving our grid constrained customers. We'll recoup that cost over a span of time via a rate that we're able to charge for the power that we're supplying to the site. Next slide. Our timeline is pretty expeditious as well, and that being said, we released our site host applications today, which is really exciting on our behalf. We'll be taking a look at sites throughout the next month, issuing our request for qualifications and request for proposals in the June timeframe, and interviewing and then aligning forces with a good EPC in the July timeframe, and then going through the whole entitlement and design and build process for the remainder of the year, when we plan to cut ribbon and break ground essentially in 2020, early 2020, most likely Q1 of 2020. Next slide. So construction timeline in parallel with the review timeline, contract signing in August, design build planning September through December, construction microgrid late 19, early 20, and then that's when interconnection agreements and all those documents will be put into play, and we get to sit in the queue and wait for the interconnection agreement. So that's pretty much our expeditious process to facilitate a need here in the local area and address a microgrid strategy. Next slide. I think that's wrapping up our pretty quick and sweet. I just wanted to make it short. So.
Well, we are very excited about what you guys are doing, and I recently, Matt, had the opportunity to chair a CCA event in the East Coast Tri-County region of New York, New Jersey, and for Connecticut folks, and we talked about the ability for CCA in wholesale markets like California to really leverage the value of their customer base and their revenues to integrate advanced energy solutions at the local level. That's exactly what this is. So we are excited to track your progress and look forward to having you guys back. Maybe in another 6 months or so, you can come and give an update. Allie, were there any questions that came through for Matt?
Yes, there were. How long are the interconnection wait times in MVCP? How long are they in regions with normal wait times?
We're looking at, we've dealt with customers that are waiting upwards of 5 years. They've been in the queue, as little as 18 months. It's truly dependent on the size of the service needed, the upgrades needed. So we're just trying to facilitate that from behind the meter side and be able to let them not only grow their businesses but build their communities. And we believe this is a good process to approach that. So it kind of it seems to be a good solution right now. So yeah, we're looking forward to reporting in on the progress of it all.
Okay. Matthew, forgive me if you already said this. Is there a maximum number of sites that you're going to authorize this year?
We're considering one or more. It depends on what applications come in.
Okay.
Ideally this first round is going to be, keep it as simple as we can and approach it and be sure that we're getting things right. And we are planning to, assuming it all goes well, roll out another round and potentially keep this as a revolving program.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today. I don't believe there are any other questions. Allie, did any others come through?
Yeah, we have one more. Can you further explain the benefits to the site hosts for the Microgrid Smart Connect program?
Briefly,
Sure,
can you do that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's an octopus question, right? But we can definitely benefit the site hosts via our rate structures that we're able to charge them. It doesn't put that heavy burden of financial commitment for the whole capex of the system on their books. So that way we can relieve their resources and let them function in their core of business versus trying to take on energy projects that are more in our wheelhouse, so to speak.
Great. Okay. Matthew, thank you very much for doing this.
We had one more, Sean.
Okay, we'll do that quick.
And not talk about the benefits or values to MBCP.
Well, the benefits or values to MBCP, we get to dive into designing new rate structures for customers, as well as market opportunities once we have the assets to be able to interconnect them. There's going to be the ability to sell back to the wholesale market and the retail market, and it's a true win-win on both parties. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on now because we're running a little bit late. Thanks again, Matthew, for joining us. We're now going to shift over to Sean McNeil to provide a brief legislative update from Cal CCA. Sean?
Thank you, Sean, and thanks for having me back. I'll try and get through this pretty quickly. I think my agenda looks a little bit longer than it actually will be, so I'll go through this as quickly as I can. It's every session there's always sort of a dominating policy discussion around some sort of issue area. In the last couple of years, it's been housing and homelessness. This year, certainly, it's really been energy, and I suspect that as the session continues, and even though as sessions continue, bills start to drop off the list, I expect that conversation to become even more robust as we actually narrow down which bills those are going to be and which issues we're going to focus on. And it really kind of started early on in the session last month. After sort of the bills were introduced, there were three pretty robust informational hearings, two of them held in the Senate, one of them held in the Assembly. You can see those on the slide there. I just want to point out that Cal CCA was a lead presenter in all three of those hearings. The first one, we more or less focused on, in terms of the bankruptcy in Cal CCA, reminding people that CCAs were sort of brought onto the scene during the first bankruptcy, really to provide energy stability. So we discussed sort of the historical pieces to that, as well as reporting on some of the risks that we see with the PG&E bankruptcy, A lot of those issues have been sort of put on hold or resolved for us, at least temporarily. So there aren't too many issues affecting CCAs. I think I reported about that last week. The second hearing was the assembly hearing, which was the following day. That one focused more on sort of reliability and affordability, opening up that issue. And Cal CCA sort of focused on their creditworthiness, their ability to procure, even though they are young. And also, we briefly discussed reliability and also shared some of our sort of priorities and goals as part of any utility restructuring. And then on the 19th, the last of the informational hearings, this covered a lot of the same issues in the March 6th hearing, but I would say that this one went into more depth on these topics. So I think in terms of if you wanted to watch a hearing and learn more, I think that one would be a good hearing to kind of go back and take a look at. One of the particular issues that was brought up in all three hearings, and that I believe is going to be one of the sort of central policy discussions as we get deeper into the session, is on resource adequacy. And I think this hearing really for the first time kind of revealed some of the problems with that. And I want to bring up that in each of the hearings, it was cited that CCAs filed waivers for resource adequacy in 2018, and that there were 11 waivers sought, and that CCAs made up most of those waivers. That was repeated in every single hearing. In the third hearing, that issue was resolved, and it was clarified that CCAs were 0 of the 11 waivers that were sought. So the PUC had been misrepresenting, misspoken on those issues at 3 legislative hearings, and we wanted that clarified. So that was clarified in the third hearing. You can see that sort of clarification with an exchange between President Picker and Senator Wiener at the 53-minute portion of that hearing. You can also get a really good explanation from the PUC Energy Division staff on resource adequacy at the 51-minute point of the hearing. All 3 hearings can be seen on Cal Channel, and if you look at the date, you just scroll to that date and you'll be able to find the hearing and watch it. So I encourage you, for anybody who wants to kind of get a sense of what issues are going to be debated this year in the session, to take a look at that. The other really big issue is the governor's strike team. For those of you who don't know, on the governor's State of the State on February 12th, he announced that he was going to be convening a team to develop a strategy on how to address wildfire liability, but also a number of other issues related to energy. So those are access to safe, affordable power, justice for fire victims, fairness to the employees of the utilities, and protections for ratepayers. The governor in that State of the State said he was going to release sort of like a roadmap within 60 days. Today was that 60-day point, and the report was released. You can watch the press conference at caloes.ca.gov. You can also get a copy of the report on the governor's website, and that's www.gov.ca.gov. And the report covered sort of 5 issues. One, that the state needs to prevent and fight catastrophic wildfires. So it lists some ideas around that. The second point was renewing California's commitment to clean energy. The third point was allocating responsibility to the wildfire costs. So embedded in that, think of inverse condemnation. The fourth issue was strengthening the utility market regulation. There's a lot of sort of CCA discussion in that portion of the report, particularly on looking at some sort of central buyer or backstop for RA, which is something that we have been discussing and circulating amongst stakeholders as well. And the fifth one was holding PG&E accountable for safety. So those were the sort of 5 big areas that the report covered. Again, you can watch the press conference and also get a copy of the report online. It's pretty easy to find. One of the other sort of big discussion items is the commission on the catastrophic wildfire costs and recovery. That
Hey, Sean.
yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt here. So in the interest of time, tell me, is this SB 901 critical for CCA, or shall we just share?
Well, I would just say for people who want to learn more about it, take a look at it. It is important for us because it impacts ratepayers, and so that's why we are engaged in following that.
Awesome.
And that's the biggest thing I wanted to leave with that. For our bills, we have taken positions on 25 bills, but I've just kind of listed sort of the top ones that we are looking at for this session right now. There's a Bradford bill on supplier diversity that we are supporting. There's an AB 56, which is also sort of dominating the conversation. This kind of circles back to resource adequacy. We are involved in that bill. We have taken an oppose on this one because the bill is much more broad than resource adequacy, so it's more of a centralized procurement for renewables, and we have issues with that, autonomy issues, but we are working with the author. Right now we're opposed. Two other bills that are really highlighted are SB 350, also focused on resource adequacy. This bill is narrowed to that. We have issues with the mechanics, but we are in agreement that something needs to be done in this issue area. We are providing our recommendations with the author as well as a number of other stakeholders. SB 520, this deals with provider of last resort. We have a number of concerns with the mechanics in this bill, though the author has said this is a spot bill, wants to encourage more conversation amongst all stakeholders, so we are certainly at the table on that one. The last three are bills that we are opposed to. One is SB 155, and this looks at sort of IRPs and enforcement of those. We think it's premature. The IRP 2018 round was sort of meant as a trial to kind of see where people are at. And what we found is that the process was flawed. A lot of the benchmarks that we were asked to report on were changed or added at the last minute. And so there was a flaw in the system. We believe that all those issues will be fixed and don't see a need for the bill at this time. And I think the following AB 1584 sort of falls in that bucket as well. The last bill, AB 1362, an O'Donnell bill, this bill is really alarming to us as it undermines sort of our code of conduct bill that was passed back in 2011, SB 790 by Senator Mark Leno. This bill undermines that effort. So we are opposing that one and have real big concerns with that. And so that is pretty much all I have to report on.
Sean, nice job. You covered a lot in a very short time. Allie, I don't think we've got any questions. I'm not seeing any for Sean. Other than I think there was a comment here, Sean, wasn't the Wiener Picker exchange regarding the waivers and the March 5th hearing not March 19th? That's just a small matter and they're looking for it.
I believe it was the Wiener one was the 19th one.
Okay, all right. Well, people can check out both and hopefully find it. I don't see any other questions here, so I will move us along and say thank you again for joining us. Always super important to know what you guys are working on, so thank you very much. Okay, with that, I'm going to shift us to our regulatory report, do my best to be done with it by 1 o'clock. We might go to, 2 o'clock. We might go to 2:05. Unfortunately, Scott Blazing is out with pneumonia, the poor guy, so we're sending him our very best for a speedy recovery. However, Scott was very kind and sent through some notes on all of these matters, so I'm going to get through these as quickly as I can. And if you have questions, what I would like to ask you to do is to email them. We'll send them to Scott, and then we'll populate them out to the rest of the group once we get responses. All right, so here we go. The proposed decision in the IRP proceeding. Okay, so the proposed decision recognizes that a majority of procurement decisions through 2030 will come from CCAs, In fact, about 90% of it, or about 10,000 megawatts. In its comments, CalCCA stated that CCAs are up to this challenge, and the CCAs want the CPUC's IRP process to succeed. However, CalCCA urges much greater cooperation and reliance on local inputs and contributions. The PD recently criticized the quality of the CCA's IRPs and suggests more of a centralized planning approach. A key question on this one is whether the current IRP should drive actual procurement, with CCA's, ESPs, and at least one IOU, San Diego, urging caution against this, whereas organizations like TURN and other environmental groups are urging that this IRP not be merely a planning exercise, but an actual procurement, that actual procurement and enforcement emerge from it. So there's clearly some debate there. Reply comments on this matter are due on April 15th, next week, and the Commission could act on this as early as its April 25th meeting. So there you have it on the IRP. The direct access order rulemaking. This is the rulemaking that is implementing SB 237 from last year's legislative session. This proceeding is moving very quickly, mainly due to how late SB 237 was signed, that the Commission actually took it up in its rulemaking. So it's now on a bit of a fast track. As scheduled, the Commission plans to adopt a Phase 1 decision at its May 30th meeting. Phase 1 deals with how to implement the 4,000 gigawatt hours of new DA that was authorized through SB 237. The staff proposal goes like this, and then I'm going to tell you what CCA's counter proposal is. The staff proposal says allocate the 4,000 gigawatt hours on an IOU service area basis in relation to IOU load eligible for DA. Implement the DA expansion on January 1, 2020 to ensure RA procurement compliance, and use the existing wait list. There have been opening and reply comments filed. CalCCA filed lengthy reply, including the following. They're asking the Commission not to just look at allocation among the IOUs, but consider the disparate impact that could result from using the DA waitlist, including a disproportionate amount of DA in any one CCA service territory. In this regard, East Bay Community Energy submitted reply comments showing the disproportionate impact on their service territory in Alameda County. Since the CCAs are impacted by potential loss of load due to departing load through DA, principally in regard to resource adequacy procurement, the IOUs should provide certain information on the wait list to allow for CCA planning. Again, these are CalCCA's comments. The Commission should address a situation that DA customers have expressed concerns about, namely DA CCA switching. Under the IOU's current interpretation, if a DA customer switches to its CCA, the customer is unable to switch back to DA service. Whereas, if a DA customer switches between ESPs, there is no similar restriction. As such, DA customers are unwilling to switch to their CCA, and they lose that choice. CalCCA is asking the Commission to address all of these issues in the Phase 1 part of the rulemaking. Phase 1 PD is expected by April 30th for adoption at the May 30th meeting. So this is happening very, very quickly. Moving on now to PCIA matters. I think many of you are aware that there's been ongoing work for quite a while now in the working group process. There are two working groups that have been identified, the first of which addresses the benchmark true-up and other benchmark-related issues. The second working group addresses the option to prepay the PCIA and the methodology to do that. PG&E and CalCCA are co-chairs in Working Group 1. SDG&E and ARM and DAC, which are direct access groups, are co-chairs for Working Group 2. There's also the IOU's 2018 Brown Power True-Up calculation happening through this proceeding. A victory that the CCA's obtained in the IOU's recent ERA forecast decisions, which implements the new PCIA, was to require that the IOUs recalculate the PCIA that was in play for 2018 using a Brown Power True-Up, which was adopted in last year's PCIA decision, instead of the Brown Power forecast that was used previously. This will likely result in a slight reduction in PCIA for CCA customers. Edison filed an application for rehearing on the Commission's 2018 Brown Power True-Up determination. PG&E did not file an application for rehearing on that. PG&E asked for additional time to implement the True-Up and plans to submit its True-Up advice letter on April 18th next week, with implementation expected on June 1st. Edison submitted its Brown Power True-Up advice letter on March 19th for implementation on or about June 1. Clean Power Alliance and Cal Choice protested Edison's advice, urging, among other things, that Edison should not have included their Mountain View plant in the 2018 True-Up, since the Commission only prospectively authorized inclusion of Mountain View beginning in 2019. So there's clearly some mechanics at play and in debate. With resource adequacy, we are now on to Track 3. The Commission is considering various proposals in Track 3. Proposals have been submitted and comments filed. The next step is the issuance of a proposed Track 3 decision, which should occur in May. This is according to the scoping memo. The Track 2 central buyer discussion. In its previous RA decision, the Commission punted on its proposal for a central buyer and set that issue for further consideration. Recently as yesterday, the first workshop on this matter was scheduled. The workshop will occur on April 22nd and 23rd. As stated in the notice, the workshop will be facilitated by the IOUs, which has been a bone of contention, with various parties asking for neutral facilitation, and I'm imagining including Cal CCA. Last but not least, thanks for hanging in there, the PG&E safety investigation. On April 3rd, PG&E named Bill Johnson as its new CEO. Bill Johnson is the outgoing CEO for a major public power entity, the Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA. PG&E also named 10 new directors. 2 workshops have been scheduled in PG&E's safety investigation proceeding. On April 15th, there will be a workshop that is full of scholarly participants. The principal focus on corporate governance and its impact on safety culture. In the afternoon, PG&E will introduce its new CEO, and he will describe their new board selection process with emphasis on strengthening PG&E's safety culture and navigating their Chapter 11 bankruptcy process. The second workshop within the safety investigation will occur on April 26th. This workshop is yet to be fleshed out, but one of the panel will include a discussion of the transition from an investor-owned utility to a publicly owned utility. So that wraps up our remarks, and I want to thank Scott Blazing for providing those, even though he was not able to deliver them today. And with that, I don't believe there are any questions. If there are, as I said, please submit them by email, and we'll get them answered and off to you. So let's wrap up today. There are a number of things happening here over the next month or two. Next week, Clean Power Exchange providing a discussion on microgrids, this time focused on Redwood Coast Energy Authority. So we've got a lot of focus on microgrid, followed by a microgrid conference in San Diego in May, solar conference later this month. Our next market call is in June, followed shortly thereafter by the gathering, our annual gathering of the tribe through the Business of Local Clean Energy Symposium. That's sponsored by the Center for Climate Protection down in Orange County. Want to remind you all that Cal CCA has just initiated their a campaign called the Bright Future Campaign. they are asking, the Bright Energy Future, excuse me, they are asking for folks to follow that link and endorse the campaign. So check it out on their website. Last but not least, I will remind folks that we are hiring a strategic partnership and development consultant. We've had pretty good response on that. Still looking for additional resumes and applicants if you are interested in joining us. It is a part-time position. So with that, we are going to wrap up. Thanks everybody for hanging in there with us on this beautiful Friday afternoon. Wishing you all a good weekend and look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks again to our speakers, and everybody have a great weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.